The short answer is there will be people that are coming that are in the industry that have the skills that will move and will want to go to a company that can offer them the place where they can hone those skills. So to some degree, I would say that if you don't train your people, well, someone else will.
Welcome back to the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world, with your host, Peggy Smedley.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Peggy Smedley Show. As always, I'm your host, Peggy Smedley. My next guest is here to talk about transportation management systems, sharing how they have evolved over the years and how AI is now playing a role. He will also talk about legacy TMS systems and if the skilled labor shortage is playing a factor in the future landscape for TMS. Please join me in welcoming Arthur Axelrad. He is the co-founder and CEO of Dispatch Science. Arthur, welcome to the show.
Peggy, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm delighted. You've never been on the show, and this is a great subject, especially when we talk about the future of work and AI, and everybody's up in arms because there's so much talk about what's really happening. So, Arthur, let's start by having you explain. I think a really good place for us to start our conversation is having you explain by defining what is TMS, Transportation Management Systems, as I started off by my intro, and having you explain to our listeners what it is today. Let's start with the definition.
Sounds good. So Peggy, in the logistics and supply chain world, there are companies that have as a mission to deliver parcels. And that can happen on many different segments and methods. Parcels can be sent by freight. They can go by train, by boat, by plane, by truck. And all of that requires coordination and logistics and planning and cost tracking and revenue tracking. So transportation management software is essentially that segment of business management software that specializes in managing the transportation of goods. So that's typically something that's leaving from an inventory or a warehouse at one place, and it's moving through multiple hands, multiple carriers, multiple parties to move those goods to the final recipient. So that's at a high level, the space that transportation management systems play in. And then it's a really broad, big market. Like I said, there's air freight, there's ocean freight, over the road as well. And so there's software systems that specialize in each of these different methods of travel. And to wrap it all up, the other kind of key piece is whether or not that transportation, those deliveries are happening at the beginning of their journey or at the end of their journey when, as an example, you as a consumer receive your final delivery of an Amazon parcel. And it's TMS is a software that manages that whole process.
And it's interesting you talk about that because we can talk about the founder of FedEx, as we all know, just recently passed away, and to see how a service like that, which is FedEx, has evolved, and it has, to what we're talking about right now, Amazon, to see, and that's a completely different way and different approach. So let's talk about that very idea of how TMS in itself has evolved to accommodate. And I think, and maybe you can tell me if there's a patchwork of systems that are accommodating the various needs, and just looking at that evolution that I just described to you there, and the owners and the way they think and way they've had to think, and just the way the technology has had to accommodate the needs of the consumers, where it was a little bit slower to now, I want it yesterday, as a matter of fact, if you think about that.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's a very fragmented marketplace. You have companies that are shippers. Think of a retailer, think of an Amazon, think of a Best Buy. Any organization that's business is to essentially sell something that then will need to manage the process of shipping it. Then you have other organizations whose business is the delivery itself, so the carriers. And so these are the organizations that are now tasked with picking up those parcels and figuring out how to get them where they're going. And that could be through a complex network of stops. It could be through a combination of air travel as well as over the road. And each of these companies has very specific needs now in terms of how to execute the logistics behind making that happen. When you think about moving one parcel from A to B, it may not be so hard, but what happens when you have tens, 20, hundreds of thousands of parcels each day that you're trying to move through a network? That takes software, that takes sophistication, and that's what's been evolving very quickly over the last few years.
It's an interesting thing again that you raise when you talk about legacy TMS kind of systems or carriers holding things back. Because if I think about things, I think about then, does that mean like a postal carrier, a postal system? Are they considered that TMS versus what you look at when you describe like a Best Buy or an Amazon, who's completely different from, again, a FedEx who's now saying, I'm going to use the postal system to make things happen faster, quicker. It just seems that it's an evolving system that has changed of, again, I'll go back to my earlier, are there a patchwork of systems now that have come into play that have made our whole way of doing things completely different than the way we ever imagined it, let's say a few decades ago?
Oh, 100%. It's not just a patchwork of systems, it's a patchwork of companies and service providers. If you think about that, in the delivery industry, there are many companies that don't have the brand recognition of the UPS, FedEx, and DHLs. But that massive group of companies that don't have the renown, those are the ones that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They're the ones that are in the background moving those parcels from one to another. And the nature of the work that they do also varies between the different deliveries that they're doing. Delivering pharmaceutical products. Some companies might be delivering organs for transplant. So they're doing really critical mission critical healthcare related deliveries with all kinds of HIPAA compliance requirements for privacy. They also need to have special training to make sure that the items don't spoil, don't get contaminated. So you've got healthcare as a segment, if you will, within that transportation. But that same carrier, maybe not the same driver, but the same carrier could turn around and be doing deliveries of paint or tires or something else. And that might have been in partnership with a DHL or a UPS. So yeah, it's for sure a patchwork. And I think the other key point that you raised earlier was the evolution of the technology, because 10 years ago, a lot of this was done kind of paper-based, where people knew their way around the city, people had their established routes. In the old days, I'm going to date myself here, but when I was younger, I remember taking a road trip and you would go out there and buy like a Rand McNally atlas and look at a map on a piece of paper and plan your route. That does not exist today at all. It's dramatically changed. So the same way that everyday consumers have access to Google Maps and route optimization technology, now so do the companies that are doing those deliveries. And those technologies are the ones that have been changing the game and making transportation management systems evolve substantially.
It's funny how you had to clarify and say a Rand McNally map. You couldn't just send a Rand McNally because you were worried half the audience might not know what you're saying. So I was with you. I knew what you're saying. But let's talk about that, because now let's move to the AI side of this, because I've been kind of going back and forth with folks on LinkedIn. Actually, as we're talking about all this in the last couple of weeks here, talking about the unlocking AI tools and where we are with all kinds of tools, not just necessarily just in TMS, but the idea, are we talking about AI hype versus impact these days? And that's what we have to talk about when we talk about data or any solutions. I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I think it's very critical. And we're in this juncture right now as companies are trying to decide, where do we go? How do you leverage it? Because you have to understand the data, whether we're using in the elements of where AI is going to make an impact, and where you really have to understand the power of the data and the way you're leveraging it. It's one thing to have tools. It's another thing to understand the data behind the tools.
Yeah, so the AI has been an interesting conversation at many levels. What we're seeing is that there's, growth of the AI on the periphery, meaning that people are using AI adjacent to the core tools. They're using it as an accelerator. They're using it to the generative AI stuff, where they're using it to craft messages even faster, have it write documents, have it read documents. There's ways where the AI can reduce some manual tasks for certain people. What we're not yet seeing, at least not on the TMS side of things, is where it is AI is replacing the core underlying software itself. I would say that the analogy there is like trying to compare the AI that you might use for using ChatGPT to write a letter versus the AI that's powering a Waymo automated driving vehicle. It's it's not the same caliber. There's a lot more complexity that goes into being able to drive a vehicle autonomously using AI. And so from a TMS perspective, there is a similar thing. We're using AI as tools to accelerate certain processes. For example, AI can now allow a driver to take a photo of someone's chicken scratch that they put on an envelope for an address and use that to read the address into the system. You can use AI to accelerate your order entry. You can start to use AI to replace a traditional telephone operator to take order information over the phone and things like that. What we're seeing is that the software itself is still at the heart of what businesses are using to manage the business. And AI cannot yet replace the software itself.
So as we talk about last mile carriers really using AI in 2025, are we there yet? Last mile deliveries, all these kind of discussions, is any of that actually happening, or what are we really talking about then? We've got a lot more to go there then.
I feel like we're early stage. So we're seeing experimentation, we're seeing people trying different initiatives. As I said, there's AI being used for image recognition, document recognition. There's use cases of AI being used to augment dispatching and route planning capabilities. But it's not yet at the point where, let's say it this way, what we're seeing is everybody's always asking the question, is AI going to replace this? Is AI going to eliminate all the people? I think there comes a time where we got to not pull punches. And the fact is, yeah, there will be some replacement, but there's also a significant amount of displacement. Some people that are doing certain jobs, they'll be able to be so much more efficient and do more of the same work because they're using AI as a tool. But it's not going to replace them all.
So let's again analyze this. We're talking about, let's go back and talk about the original type of carriers that we had. When we talk about the post office, what type of carrier that was. And we talk about the development of what Best Buy you talked about, or Target now, or when we talk about these brick and mortars that they evolved into a different type of community using TMS in ways that we never thought. So when we say this evolution where jobs will be eliminated, new jobs will be created. We never even imagined an Amazon back in the day when FedEx created itself, or when we thought of the post office. Who would have imagined the post office and FedEx would come together? Do we then say to society, we need creative thinkers. We need people to solve new problems where new ones are created to solve greater problems that arise. And you just described organ delivery. You described things here, pharmaceuticals. All of those, as we have an aging population, are only going to increase. They're not going to get smaller. As I raise these, are those the kind of things we have to say instead of creating all this hype about AI is going to displace, replace, whatever? Should we not be saying this is where we should be thinking about what can happen versus what is going to happen?
100%. When route optimization tools started becoming commonplace a few years ago, that's about the time when we got into the market. That's around the time where we saw an opportunity to inject into legacy transportation management systems some new technology. That's now happening again with AI. So going back to what you said earlier, yeah, the old way, the post office and the manual processes were that people used to look at maps and plan using paper and create these very static routes for drivers that would basically go from point A to B to C to D and run a segment of stops throughout the day. And it was all very, very consistent, day in, day out. Each driver did the same thing. Well, with the route optimization technology that's now been available for a number of years, that manual process doesn't have to be such a big lift done periodically. It can be done dynamically every day. Now, layer on top of that AI, and it can go even that much faster. So I think people were very quick to embrace route optimization. I would urge them to be just as quick to embrace AI as just the next level in the technology evolution.
So I'm going to challenge you. So respectfully, look at what I'm saying. Are we then at the risk of just bolting on emerging technology onto old systems by saying that? Or should we be thinking even bigger on how we can change those systems to be even better in routing systems? And maybe that's what you're suggesting. I'm not sure.
It's a great point, and it's one that I encounter on a regular basis because there is a difference between legacy software that's still in the market that's been in place now for 20, 30 years. And go look at any bank and you still find out that the underlying technology running huge swaths of our industry are these legacy AS400 and older technology type systems. And those are exactly the ones that are at risk and you almost cannot bolt on to them well enough. And putting AI onto those would be, frankly, probably putting a band-aid on an infection. It's only a matter of time until it stops working or until underlying problems become more serious. However, if you're using modern systems that are already web connected, use the newer technologies that can adapt, that can change as they work with the AI, and they leverage the AI fully, I think that's where the real wins are to be had. So to recap there, I think companies need to look at putting in the right foundation, because if you try to build on a bad foundation, your castle's going to crumble.
Isn't that kind of what we had in the air traffic control systems? We built on more layers of junk on top of junk on top of junk. Bad data is bad data. And when we look at AI, we have to look at garbage in is garbage out. If we're not looking at the good data here, when we look at TMS systems, do we have to make sure we're looking at good data if you're going to build and be innovative with AI? You can't just say, I'm going to build on, try to say we've got this great innovation. We have to look at really good data to build on that. That's got to be the structure for which, and any company has to know what their data is first.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what we're seeing now is that AI is coming to the market as a big equalizer. And what I mean by that is it's going to allow new upstart small companies to compete neck and neck with very large organizations, because they can now offer the same end result. They can achieve the same end result much faster, and they're not hamstrung by their systems. So if you look at how fast and how sophisticated Amazon grew and became, and other companies have come up onto the playing field, this is where the larger companies that are running all those older, larger legacy systems are struggling to keep up. They're hamstrung by their legacy tech.
So are you trying to say, but there's no one common platform? So there's not a common standard, there's not a common protocol, there's not a common approach to any of this. So how do you not know if something's going to be, you throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, in the old expression here? But that's part of the challenge that they're going to have to deal with, of saying, is it going to constantly open AI? We say this, but it's going to be evolving so fast. How do they keep up with the changes that will be occurring to know that they can be as competitive? If it's so cutting edge, it's so moving fast, they have to have the right skilled people who are going to be able to keep up with those evolving changes.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to what you said that I find important and interesting. Let's take a car as an example. There was a number of years ago where cars went from carburetors to fuel injectors. So having a modern transportation management system doesn't mean you're using just one, but it means you're using one that has the characteristics of a modern TMS. So by that, I mean that it's not, using the car analogy, you've got one that's cloud-based, cloud first, that is not running on-premise. So I'm just trying to kind of compare the idea of a fuel injector versus an old carburetor. And you don't need to have the exact same model, whether you're running a GM or a Ford, as long as they both have fuel injection, you're good. From a TMS perspective, as long as you're running a cloud-based TMS that has open APIs, that has integrated route optimization, that has those live connection points that allow it to integrate to the third-party systems and the AI tools, whether it's ours or someone else's of the same caliber, you're good.
So now let's answer the question about the skilled labor. I know that's
And then
where
the
you're
people
going.
side. And then the people side is exactly that now. People are going to need training. They're going to need to upskill on the new systems. And there's going to be just a lot less manual processes that they will have to go through. Companies will need and want to invest in their people, give them the opportunity and the training to learn these new systems, because their jobs and their functions are going to be less clerical and fundamentally, yeah, more creative. They have to now, rather than execute tasks, they have to create. They have to use tools. They have to be more responsive to real world conditions.
Do you think companies will have to realize they're going to have to be the ones investing in keeping their employees sharp? We used to have this old mindset. If we trained our employees, they're going to get up and leave. So do companies have to start thinking, look, if you want to have the best and the brightest, you're going to have to keep upskilling, reskilling so that they stay with you, because there's always going to be that next job, because it's not like they stay with you 15, 20 years like they used to. Now there's always that next best job. So there's always, you're going to have to do the right things anyways, because you don't know the way, they're going to think anyway. So the best way to keep them is to entice them the way they want to be for what inspires them most.
That sounds like the subject of its very own 30-minute podcast. I don't know that I can do justice to that question in so short a time. It gets into a lot of factors about motivating people and working conditions. And the short answer is there will be people that are coming that are in the industry that have the skills that will move and will want to go to a company that can offer them the place where they can hone those skills. So to some degree, I would say that if you don't train your people, well, someone else will. You might as well start, and then there's just a whole bunch of other good practices that one has to do to keep people motivated and working.
When you look at this right now, is the skilled labor shortage a problem or a factor right now in TMS? Are you seeing that as an issue right now? Like some of the other verticals are seeing it as a challenge?
On the TMS side, if I think about conversations had with customers and what we're seeing in the industry, around the time of COVID, there was a driver shortage. The bigger labor shortage was with respect to drivers. My sense is that's come down. I can't speak for everyone, but the number of companies telling me like, oh my God, we cannot find enough drivers to meet our workload and our obligations, that's come down a little bit. But I still hear people saying that like retaining drivers is a challenge. So that's one area. In terms of the back office, again, Dispatch Science, we cater to the mid-market. So we focus on companies that operate fleets of 10 to, let's say, a couple thousand drivers. So they have back office staff that can vary from 2 people to maybe 100. And no, the answer to your question is there's not been a challenge from our customers that they cannot find back office staff.
When you look now, we've covered the gamut of a lot of things today, but when you look at what's next against America's logistics landscape in the bigger scheme of things, what are you seeing as maybe the opportunities and the challenges? Because I think there's both that are gonna face the industry.
One of the biggest things that I think is coming or will come soon. So the logistics industry relies very much still today on EDI, electronic data interchange. It's a technology that's been around since the 70s. And over the last 10, 15 years, there's been APIs, which is the modern version of that has hit the landscape. So API is growing, the use of that is growing, but the majority of the exchange of information between client and supplier is still happening on this old-fashioned, this legacy EDI network. So what I foresee is going to come, particularly with AI, is going to be a massive interconnection throughout the supply chain where information is going to flow much more freely from supplier to supplier to customer along that ecosystem. And I think API and AI are going to be the drivers that make it like instantaneous now to get information and share information across supply chain partners.
How long is that going to take? Because we've had these islands, these silos for years, and you're hoping that AI is going to bring that to knock those barriers down. Will it take a couple of years? AI has shortened a lot of things a lot faster. It's expedited everything. What do you think it's going to take? I know I got a crystal ball for you.
Yeah, look, I'm an eternal optimist, so I'll say whatever I take, you might want to double or triple it. But let's say this, I think that we're going to see a very remarkable, noticeable difference in about 2, 3 years' time. It's going to keep happening in the shadows as it has been happening, but within I would say probably like 3 years from now, I think there will be an inflection point.
And do you see that being driven by the large companies? Do you think it'll be both large and small having to come together, by the shippers, the containers, everything that happened globally, domestically, a combination of everything having to come together? It's the perfect storm.
Yeah, no, great question. I think it's going to come down to the driver there is going to be the speed of information going through those that are in the modern world. They're going to outcompete their legacy counterparts. And so so I think the driver is going to be a financial driver where people are going to be moving because they have to just to compete.
So final thoughts, anything you want to leave our listeners with, what you want them to think about going forward?
Transportation management system, the unsung hero behind the food on your table and how supply moves throughout our world. And like many systems out there and business systems out there, it's permanently evolving. We like to think that we're a contributor to that process. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Arthur Axelrad, co-founder and CEO of Dispatch Science. Thank you for your time. I've enjoyed this conversation. What's your URL? Where can our listeners go, get more from what we talked about, and continue the conversation with you?
Thanks, Peggy. You can check us out at www.dispatchscience.com. Follow us or me on LinkedIn. Yeah, check us out.
Great. Thank you again for joining me today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, listeners, that is all the time we have for this segment. Make sure to share and subscribe to our episodes each week. As always, you could share your thoughts with me on X at Connected World, or follow me at LinkedIn and continue the conversation there. Please check out our website at connectedworld.com or our show website at thepeggysmedleyshow.com. Don't go away. I'll be right back after this commercial break. This is the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world. And remember, with great technology comes great responsibility.